this move towards using sort of Power BI and the way that I've seen it working is really impressive. And if that is really solving quite a few problems, that will then determine what happens next. Because, you know, anyone, whether they're profit or social enterprise or however they're driven, you've got to answer the needs of the teachers and the needs of the students, and also it's really difficult to do that really quickly. I mean, we have so many requests for certain things, and we sit there and think, oh my god, I wish I could do all of this like right now, and I'd love to do it. And actually there's nothing that pains me more and stops me sleeping at night that when I think, oh, you know, I wish we could build that one thing that I know that this person particularly wants, and I think it's really important. But you know, you're always often struggling with what to prioritize, because also when you build things in a tech company, you've got to build things well, right? You can't just build a half-baked approach, because that doesn't really help anyone. And education platforms are quite challenging, because when you go into a school, they want so much from you that you have to have done all of that development work already and constantly innovating. But I think, you know, it is blending that with the innovation side. When someone wants the answer to it, but someone's got a problem, you know, it's fantastic that you get the professionals who understand what they're doing day in, day out, but you also get innovators. And I'm always questioning people who say, well, if you're not a teacher right now and not doing what you're doing, you know, et cetera, why are you coming up with these things? I think, well, hang on, you know, half a company are teachers. You work with teachers. Are you saying that no one should ever get involved and have ideas about an area just because they're not in the profession? Because actually that's a very narrow way of thinking. And is that what you're telling your children? Is that also what you're teaching your children in your school? Because I'd be very interested to know if you said, you know, if you're not, you know, a medic or a nurse or a paramedic, you can never have a good idea about how to improve the NHS. That's quite a damning thing to say to the children in your school, because that's what happens. And you get people who say things like that. I think that there are very few people that do that, but they're very loud. Yeah. And you know, and the question is this what you're saying to your children? Because you're basically saying that. And I think what's really interesting is to have those innovators and those thinkers, and there are a lot of teachers who are innovators and thinkers, because they are, right? And to listen to them and say, what do you need? What do you want? And then try and go back to the drawing board. And then you are going to need experienced people in technology, because they understand how it works and how to apply it and what the architect, and then you have to have the experts in privacy and data, because they're going to come in with, it's that risk management side as well. So it is about bringing the best of all of those people together and working together and collaborating together and having respect for one another, to say not one individual knows the answer to this problem, but if we all work together, then we can actually solve these problems. And in education, I think, you know, my last point that I really want to make here is that it's so urgent and it's so necessary. This is not a nice to have. This is not a nicer way of watching films while you're in lockdown and stuck at home. This is not a nicer and quicker way of getting your deliveries the next day rather than having to wait a week in terms of logistics, although obviously there are some urgent cases for that in certain areas. I get it. This is something that is happening every day that is affecting outcomes. And we're all passionate. I'm a parent, right? So I come at this from I've taught, I'm a parent. I like to innovate and solve problems, and you know, that's what I like to do. And I have a group of 80 people who also love doing that, as well as the thousands of people around the world who we work with, who are constantly collaborating with in a very formal way, right? They're kind of getting involved in the product. But that's what we need, that entire ecosystem of people working together to respect each other and their views, and to think, okay, how can we, as you say, how can we take this forwards? How can we progress to solve these problems? Because these are real problems. And I think there are a couple of, you know, and the reason I say I'm talking about people is because I've seen it now, and I didn't really believe that it existed, but there are some people who like the status quo. You know, there are people who say we don't want to change anything now, it's too much changing with COVID, we should just stay as we are. Well, you know, tell that to the 16,000 primaries that are sat there in the state sector that are really struggling, or tell that to, you know, a whole country that we're dealing with right now as part of our pro bono work, where they have got no other solution. So if you want to tell them that, go ahead, but they're not in a cushy position like you are. They're overworked, they don't know how to deal with the current situation. You know, they want some guidance, they want some tools and technology, and even when we go back to whatever that normal is going to look like, they're still going to be in as difficult position, you know, as pre-COVID. So it's not okay for them. And there are plenty of reports to say we can do better. So the only question that we're asking you is not your opinion on the fact that we should say the same and not do better. It's what can we do better? Please come up with some ideas and get together. Rethinking assessment is a really good place to go if people want to collaborate. I went to their event and they're definitely asking for thoughts about assessment, which, so if anyone's really passionate about that, and in the EdTech community as well as, teachers, go there. Rob Halfon, David Davis is a really interesting group of people. Anthony Selden, Rose Lakhani and myself co-wrote a letter to the Sunday Times, which a lot of people signed, including Lord Baker. And they are creating sort of working groups and forums where people can discuss education in general, not just assessment. And I think that this will all be, so now is a time to think about further change and how to innovate in the right way. And all opinions are welcome, even if they conflict and if they're controversial, because that is how we will end up with the best solution, is to open the debate. And as an EdTech entrepreneur, I call myself that today, but frankly, I'm just trying to solve problems using the technology that we've got. And I know that we are solving a lot of problems for a lot of people in some ways, which is great. But we also want to hear about, how can we, with our focus, do better? What else can we do to improve? Who can we work with, and collaborate with to make the impact even bigger and better for the stakeholders that really matter?
Well, I think it's actually something for society. I think everybody should be curious. And actually one of the things you talked about before getting rid of GCSEs, and actually some of the EQ skills are going to be really, really important for children going forward. So actually, as teachers, as EdTech leaders, we all need to think about how we create this sort of society of curiosity.
Yeah, exactly. And that curiosity, people lump them on as sort of extra terms, and actually they all embedded in learning, and they can be, but we do know that, from employers, we know where children have to end up eventually and create a living for themselves so that they have, a livelihood and they can hopefully enjoy life and have those opportunities. We do know those skills that are really important, that get talked about all the time. So, and that's a question for curriculum. That's a question for how can we practically achieve this, while also still maintaining what's good about the current system and what's rigorous about the current system. And so no one's saying that there aren't parts of it, and teachers are doing what they're doing, and they're doing, a grand job in so many cases. So the idea is, okay, but how can you, that doesn't mean you can't make someone's life easier, and so it is about, trying to foster that creative environment. And I think that we will see, there's so many people talking about it now, and so many influencers talking about it. I think that you will see that. I think there's so many children talking about it. The one group that we often talk about, we speak to them a lot just because we obviously have interactions with students a lot, because they have access to our learner platform, and we get a lot of their feedback, which is really exciting. One of the best courses on Century is called Brain Hack. It's not necessarily even maths and English and the sciences, it's brain hack, it's neuroscience, and the importance of sleep, and there's things on well-being in there, and getting their feedback on what that means to them is really important. So involving children in the conversation, I think we're making inroads. I think we're making movements towards it. Churchill talks about never wasting a good crisis, which sounds awful given the devastating time that we've had, but there is a big question mark over what happens once things settle down with COVID. And this has been essentially the opportunity to really rethink and reimagine what education can look like as a whole, as well as the fact that exams have the way of assessing children has changed, and also I think the big question that I'll finally end on, I keep saying we'll end on a bit, is the trusting of our teachers. That should have happened last year. There was no question that should have been the way forward. The fact that there's a need to fail a third of people, with the GCSEs is just ridiculous. And I agree with Peter Hyman's word. He said it's a scandal. I think he's quite right to call it that. Would you want to really turn around to your kids at home and say, a third of you or your peers will basically fail? It's not a good message. There's talks about whether growth mind, there's controversy on neuroscience, but actually, surely when we tell children you can always achieve, there's no point saying, but we're just going to make sure a third of you fail. So I think
horrendous.
This conversation and opportunity is definitely, I think, more momentum now because of the pandemic and what's happened than there was potentially a few years ago. But there are some really good examples where people have just done it themselves. So there are schools out there where there are really good examples of them doing what they need to do for the system, but despite that, they're also they're managing to achieve so much more. And so I think we need to look at some of those examples. We need to I think the point, Nick, is let's have the wider debate. EdTech should be part of it. They shouldn't exclude EdTech, because that is saying that, well, actually somebody who's got that kind of innovative problem solving mindset isn't welcome in the conversation. And a lot of these people are parents as well. Some of them are former teachers, but the point is that, you know, that's ridiculous. So it's all very nice for people to feel like they're making a really big point, but actually it's a really rubbish point. And, you know, and EdTech people, you know, they have close links in education. They are listening. They've got their ears to the ground. They do know, you know, a fair amount of what's going on. They should be part of the conversation. And also they're the ones who are willing to risk their entire livelihoods to create something. So let's not forget that, you know, they're the ones who are sitting there saying, well, actually, I'm not going to have a secure income and go and get my 9-to-5 job. I'm actually going to risk everything and, you know, maybe put my house on it. But the point is that I'm going to actually go and create something to try and make lives better. And there's not, I think, enough respect for that with EdTech entrepreneurs, and particularly when in terms of inviting them to the conversation about what might need to improve. And I think that we should all respect the fact that, you know, there are some really, really good intentions in this sector. There are some that are much more profit driven, as you say, but I think that there are wonderful people in the sector who are trying to do a lot for their own children, and just want to solve a problem for the wider community.